Well, good afternoon. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood today, and it's a pretty beautiful day in here as well. My name is Landon King. On behalf of the School of Medicine, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today, both those that are here in person and those that are joining by live stream. I'd also like to offer regrets, as well as appreciation and congratulations from our Dean, Ted DeWeese, who unfortunately had an out-of-town conflict today. It is a great honor and a privilege to participate in the inaugural 4 Doctors Awards ceremony, during which we will recognize Dr. Paul Auwaerter as the recipient of the first Osler Award for Clinical Excellence. I would also like to recognize that Paul's wife, Karen Auwaerter, is here. Karen, thank you for joining us today. You couldn't have missed this. The 4 Doctors Awards are made possible by the generosity of Dr. Charles Homcy, an alumnus of the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. Charles, thank you for the vision and for your support of the School of Medicine, which, as many of us know, goes well beyond the remarkable generosity that has enabled today's event. So thank you for that. So in that this is our first year of the 4 Doctors Awards, I'd like to briefly share a bit of background about the awardee selection process. So the process was overseen by Maria Oliva Hemker, who's our Vice Dean for Faculty. And for this year's award, Rick Redette, who's the Physician-in-Chief for Johns Hopkins Medicine and Vice Dean for Clinical Affairs. The criteria for the award were established by the Vice Deans with Ted's approval, and included the expectation that a successful candidate would, in some combination, demonstrate clinical expertise in compassionate patient care, dedication to teaching and mentorship, leadership in clinical practice, innovation in clinical care, and professionalism. We had a robust pool of nominees, and I want to take a moment and just say congratulations to all of them for the work that they do every day, which is deserving of recognition. So the nominations were initially reviewed by a committee that was chaired by Rick Redette, and a group of finalists was identified. Rick, thanks to you and your committee for the work of being so thoughtful and working our way through that really robust list of candidates. The finalists were reviewed by a committee that was chaired by Dr. Oliva Hemker, who made the recommendation of the recipient to Dr. DeWeese for his approval. And that brings us to today. The award draws inspiration from John Singer Sargent's masterful 4 Doctors painting, watching over all of us here in the room today, and the enduring legacies of these 4 individuals: William Welch, William Halsted, William Osler, and Howard Kelly, whose contributions forever changed medical education, research, and patient care. Today, we're here to celebrate the Osler Award for Clinical Excellence. In an annual rotation going forward, we will also celebrate the Welch Award for Excellence in Basic Research, the Halsted Award for Excellence in Translational Research, and the Kelly Award in Medical Education. Again, thank you, Dr. Homcy. It's very hard to be in this room and not take at least a moment to recognize the other individual in the room who was memorialized by John Singer Sargent. That is, of course, Mary Elizabeth Garrett to my left. Absent her efforts and influence, and without her generosity and persistence, the School of Medicine, at least as we know it, would likely not exist today. Many of you know the story. After the hospital opened in 1889, plans for the School of Medicine stalled due to a major loss in the university's endowment. Garrett stepped forward to lead a fundraising campaign and offered to close the gap with a large gift to the School of Medicine. However, her generosity came with conditions. First and foremost, she required that the School of Medicine accept women on the same terms as men, a radical idea at the time. Just as radical, perhaps, were some of her other conditions, including that these individuals who were accepted had graduated from college and had a history of courses in science, really professionalizing medical education, moving beyond a trade school tradition. The trustees balked at these conditions but ultimately acceded to Garrett's terms. Thanks to her vision and her requirements, Johns Hopkins revolutionized medical training in the United States and rose to become the preeminent school of medical education in the country. Garrett prevailed upon John Singer Sargent in commissioning the Four Doctors painting, which she herself funded and remained closely involved in the process. Apparently, she left quite an impression. In a letter to William Welch, Sargent confessed that while he was pleased with the painting, being with Garrett made him feel like a rabbit in the presence of a boa constrictor. Clearly, these paintings represent a long legacy of strength and excellence, both of which we will hear more about throughout today's ceremony. So with that, to begin our program, it's my pleasure to invite Johns Hopkins President Ron Daniels to share remarks. Ron?
Thank you, Landon, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today with so many distinguished friends of Johns Hopkins and our School of Medicine today to celebrate the inaugural Four Doctors Award. It just sounds great, Charles, being able to say that. And it is a particular pleasure to recognize our inaugural honoree, Dr. Paul Auwaerter, in the company of his wife Karen and their friends and family. Now, when the four doctors, Osler, Welch, Halsted, and Kelly, sat for the painter John Singer Sargent in London in 1906, they did so in their black academic robes. Trading surgical gowns for academic regalia might have first seemed a strange fit, but indeed, this was a deliberate choice by the artists, fitting garb for the learned men who had fundamentally transformed the medical profession, no longer the domain of barber surgeons, but of physician scientists. But there was one unforeseen glitch. Black gowns were not exactly conducive to the composition of the portrait. They made the doctors fade into the dark background like apparitions. As Dr. Welch remembered it, Sargent called his subjects four white dots on a canvas, fretting, "It does not make a picture." Something was needed to create more depth and space in the painting, but what? So soon, in true Hopkins fashion, Sargent's imagination lit on a solution for the problem. At his other studio, there was a large tawny Venetian globe, indeed a massive tawny Venetian globe, the perfect object to create definition and bring focus to the work. The globe, however, was so massive that once transported to Sargent's studio, it was impossible to fit through the door. But Sargent was undaunted. They would, he pronounced, simply disassemble the wall. And so, brick by brick by brick, the wall was broken open to permit the globe to pass through the doorway and into the painting. The next sitting, Sargent sketched in the globe behind the subjects and stood back to observe the effect. He declared, "We've got our picture." To me, there could be no better articulation of the legacy we honor today than the understanding that its representation was incomplete without the globe. Because these founding fathers of American medicine did not only bring forward a revolution in medical research and education that would truly find a global scope, they also shared a deep commitment to the practice of medicine that would be profoundly in service to humanity, spreading human flourishing around the world, medical student by medical student, resident by resident, patient by patient. It is this legacy to which the globe in Sargent's portrait most truly attests. It is this legacy that we at Johns Hopkins strive always to embody in acquitting our foundational commitment to bringing the benefits of research and clinical excellence married for the first time ever at Johns Hopkins to the world. And it is this legacy of the four doctors that Dr. Charles Homcy found so inspiring when he conceived of the idea of this award beneath this very painting in this very room. Now, I have to confess, this is not the way that it's supposed to go when we go to a donor for supporting some initiative, some idea. The ideas are ours, the money is theirs. But in this case, the idea, the very conception of this program right from the outset was Charles. You'll forgive me, but I want to invoke a frame from my discipline, which is law. Lawyers like to use the but-for test. But for something, would something have happened? It's a way of demonstrating causation. And so in this case, I would say on the but-for test, but for Charles Homcy, we would not be sitting here today. We would not be celebrating this particular program and all that it entails. Because the award was truly born of Charles' deep reverence for the legacy of the four doctors and his belief in elevating that ethos across our institution by supporting our faculty who so clearly embody it. And he was uncertain about it as Sargent was about that globe. It is that certainty that has, as Landon indicated a moment ago, animated Charles' years of service to Johns Hopkins as trustee, as chair of counselor, as friend, and it flows freely from the wellspring of his profound dedication to Hopkins and to the foundational ideas we serve. And we see this, of course, in Paul's work. Paul, your trailblazing research has expanded scientific understanding and driven improved diagnosis and treatment of a wide range of different pathologies. We're going to hear more about this in a moment from various experts, from Lyme disease and other tick-borne infections to surgical infections, Epstein-Barr, respiratory diseases, and antibiotic resistance. You have also truly transformed our capacity for care at scale through groundbreaking new clinical practices, a full-time academic clinician program in our inpatient infectious disease consultation, and in training programs for young infectious disease investigators. And like Osler, you've not only written the book on diagnostic areas of expertise in your diagnostic area of expertise, but also brought unparalleled depth and breadth of knowledge directly to patients. Indeed, time and time again, patient after patient after patient has testified to the consistent attention, connection, and humanity that you bring to your clinical practice. This is truly the greatest embodiment of the Oslerian ethos. So, Paul, thank you for your commitment to path-breaking science and clinical excellence that has carried forward the legacy of Dr. Osler and the four doctors and made today's award so richly deserved. Congratulations. And Charles, thank you. We know that this award will do so very much to ensure that the legacy of the four doctors, the global impact and humane ethos of their trailblazing work in research, translation, training, and clinical practice remains in the frame for generations of Hopkins physicians to come, and reminds all of us of the vision and tenacity it takes to break through any barriers to success, even the occasional wall. And with that, Charles, I just would ask you to come forward. It's my privilege to present you with a small token of our appreciation for all that you've done for Johns Hopkins, for conceiving of this idea and insisting on its timely implementation. And so come forward so I can give you something, and maybe you'll say a few words. Congratulations. I'll put this here so you can talk.
Okay.
Yeah, or do you want me to hold it while you talk?
Well, first of all, it's a real privilege to be here, and you know, my message I don't need to talk about the four doctors because you're going to hear a lot about them. But as a medical student, I used to spend a lot of time when you couldn't get on your computer and look at literature, and I would come and see this picture, and I would read about the Flexen report and everything that happened here, and it just seemed to be a necessity for this institution to revel in that history and never to forget it. You know, I spent many years at the Mass General, and they have the Ether Dome, but believe me, it doesn't compare to this. So, you know, I also want to, you know, thank Michelle Glennon. Spent a lot of time on this. Really did a great job. And particularly thank Ron Daniels. What you don't know is that we're here today actually because of him. He, you know, when I first joined the trustees, you know, the major focus of the university trustees was undergraduate education, and over the past 12 years, Ron has come to own the medical school and to care about it so deeply. And when I mentioned this, I said, well, you know, it's going to take me time to fund the pledge. And he said, no, I'm going to start right now because the school needs this. And so he needs to be thanked for this. And Ron has also been a remarkable mentor to me. So, you know, I've learned a tremendous amount. And what I always loved about Hopkins was there were mentors everywhere. I mean, this place is just packed with people who want to help you. And I will never forget that. But, you know, I have to tell you one story about Ron and his mentorship. You know, I've founded many biotech companies, and one of them we hire young graduate students to actually peruse the literature. And they provide every 2 weeks kind of a report of interesting new methods, interesting new findings. And one of them is a Hopkins undergraduate who's now at Stanford as part of the ARC program. And so one of the leadership at the company asked him if he knew President Daniels. And he said, sure, Ronnie D., of course I know him. And so I heard this, and so I wrote a note to Ron, and I said, Ronnie D., is that a nom de guerre or something? I haven't heard that term before. So he sends me back a short note, and in that note was tremendous insight. And I'll never forget it. It was profound, and something I will never forget. He said, you know, inspired leadership is not about building a great faculty. It's not about, you know, renewing the research buildings of the institution, about enhancing diversity. It's about beer on the lawn on Fridays. And I started the tradition of beer on the lawn on Fridays in Pennsylvania, and I got the name Ronnie D., and it's not leaving me. So I thought about this for a long time. I said, you know, really, there is something special about beer on the lawn when you're an undergraduate, and we kind of forget that. And it's inspired me to take a whole new look at things. So actually, Ron really needs to be thanked for why we're here today. And I think it's just end with two words. I really had only two concepts here. One was to celebrate this legacy, and the other was to bring some fun to the faculty. You know, I think that academic medicine, everything has gotten tougher, and even forgetting these troubled times. And so that was the intent of the gift. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks to both of you, and thanks particularly you, Dr. Homcy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Green. I'm an internist and a historian, and I direct the Institute of the History of Medicine one flight up from here above this beautiful gilded ceiling. Please come on up and visit us. But, you know, there are risks, I should point out, to giving a historian a podium. We tend to sneeze in paragraphs. I'm going to do my best to be brief, but there's just so much to say about this portrait commissioned 120 years ago by the great benefactor of the university, Mary Elizabeth Garrett, who, as Landon pointed out, right, whose own portrait by John Singer Sargent is looking upon us from the east wall of this room. In order to depict a group of people who weren't necessarily the first physicians at Hopkins, but were her friends, or her four friends who she wanted to commission a portrait of, and who we now know as the four doctors. But even if I was to stay at this podium for an hour, and you do not want me to do that, it would not be possible to relate all that William Osler in particular has meant for our understanding of modern medicine and the pivotal role Johns Hopkins has played and continues to play in defining that field. So instead, I'll just pass around a book just so you can just look at its girth, written by another alum, Charles Bryan. Charlie Bryan is the former head of the American Osler Society, and that can make its way around. You know, thanks to the vision of Dr. Homcy, however, I don't have to get through all the story today. We're going to have occasion to gather again next year and the year after and the year after to celebrate other members of our community who embody the different values we associate with the figures in this portrait and who relate their history to our present and our future. And I think this is the crucial thing to remember as a historian, is that history lives in the present. It always lives in the present. And history is a way that we think about the future. So the single thing I'm going to try and do today is to talk a bit about a single observation about history and myth-making. So Ron Daniels has already offered us a history of the sittings in Sargent's studio in London in 1905 and 1906. And this sort of history helps us understand how an everyday object that we can take for granted, right, we can walk past many times, right, whether it's a painting, a hospital, a university, a world-famous school of medicine, these things are not inevitable fixtures in the world, but the result of human agency, of action, of decisions made within specific contexts, and oftentimes limited insight and some degree of peril. And so we can see even in these two different sketches found in the Chesney archives, which relate two very different kinds of compositions, as Sargent himself deliberated how, I'm not sure why this is getting ahead of me, but made choices in real time how to tie this group together to become something more than just a collection of four individuals wearing dark robes against a dark background. But the history of this painting extends well beyond its execution towards its reception and the symbolic importance that it's developed in generation after generation of people not only who come to this room at Johns Hopkins, but who think about medicine in the world in general. And this painting really has become a form of a creation myth of the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And I'm not using myth in the sense of mythbusters here. That would be myth as a falsehood to be debunked or a superstition to be disproved in light of rational scientific exploration. Rather, this is an approach popularized by the writer Joseph Campbell in the 1970s as myths to live by, stories we tell about ourselves that give our lives meaning and narrative structure. Now, these stories are not limited to popular culture. As the British philosopher of science, Mary Midgley, has argued, scientists also, and she would argue scientists especially need to invoke our own mythological figures to give structure and meaning to our uniquely complex work. So this painting has been enrolled in high-stakes myth-making ever since Mary Elizabeth Garrett donated the finished version to the university in 1907. Painted on a composite, you may know, of 4 different canvases weighing some 700 pounds. And in this picture, you see the work and the hydraulics that it took to remove the painting from the wall for its restoration in 2001. It hung first in McCoy Hall, and initially, in spite of this unwieldy size, traveled a few important shows of Sargent's work in the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C., in the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, before reaching its designated niche as the focal point of this room in the newly built Welch Medical Library in 1929. And the university denied many requests to reproduce the image since it was still the private possession of Mary Elizabeth Garrett. However, in 1919, and I want you to linger on this advertisement for a moment, after learning that a promotional campaign for the pseudo-ethical pain medicine anti-camnia, sold often in conjunction with heroin, quote, for colds, biliousness, dengue, and malaria, was trying to use a stolen reproduction of the painting to sell its proprietary medicine, the university decided to take out copyright on the image with the Library of Congress. And when the Journal of the American Medical Association began in 1964 and 65 a new tradition of reproducing famous paintings for its covers, Hopkins agreed to have the 4 doctors reproduced within the first year. And to recognize by the mid-1960s the ascendance of American medicine as a global leader in biomedical innovation. Dear Sirs, one Missouri physician wrote the editors after receiving the issue, I admired greatly the picture of the 4 doctors in the August 9th issue of JAMA and wondered if it would be possible to obtain a reproduction in color of this painting. Now, the Chesney contains hundreds, if not thousands, of letters of physicians likewise moved by this painting, many of whom had never set foot in Hopkins in this room, never been before it, but who found the painting inspirational and who requested reproductions for their own homes and practices. So I want to ask you all, what did this image mean to these many doctors, many of whom had never set foot in this building, never been part of Johns Hopkins, but for whom Johns Hopkins meant something? And I'm not sure why my slides are jumping, but please do bear with me. Positioned here at this focal point in this inner sanctum of this temple to biomedical knowledge that is the Welch Medical Library, this painting has become a sacred object for our institution. In turn, a symbol of the value and purpose of scientific medicine itself. It tells the story of where we came from, what we continue to value, what key endeavors will carry this institution forward into the future. That is, excellence in patient care, setting the standard of medical education, anchoring the pursuit of new knowledge in the basic sciences of health, and their translation into the treatment and prevention of disease. And in truth, all of these values are encapsulated in each of these four individuals, in the three Williams, Osler, Welch, and Halsted, and the Howard, Kelly. All of them were educators, scientists, clinicians, and innovators. But today we celebrate Dr. Auwaerter in association specifically with Sir William Osler for the particular value of clinical excellence. Now, Osler, at this point, might seem to have become an almost entirely mythological figure, a clinician who simply becomes equated with all that is best and all that is modern in medicine, and who quite literally wrote the textbook of modern medical practice, as many of you know and perhaps have read. He is depicted by his friend, the medical illustrator Max Brodel, as the patron saint of Johns Hopkins Hospital, tongue only part way in cheek. But the historical Osler, right, going beyond the mythological Osler, was still by any account a remarkable person who rose from relative obscurity in a small town north of Toronto to become the most iconic physician of his generation, whose name, after appointments at McGill, then Penn, then Hopkins, then Oxford, became synonymous with the advancement of scientific medicine through close clinical presence at the bedside. And the figure of a caring, listening, humane physician who worked at the bedside through observing, feeling, listening, and contemplating the meaning of illness for any individual person in front of him. So in turn, many cults of Osler, both here at Johns Hopkins and around the world, have reproduced a figure that's larger than life and almost impossible in some ways. So here at Hopkins, Osler is venerated most visibly, of course, in the Osler service, right, whose medical residency he founded at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, whose ties and scarves bear the one-word title of his most memorable essay, Equanimitas. Further afield, Osler is venerated by the American Osler Society, a national association founded in Minnesota that since 1970 has been, quote, dedicated to teaching the life, teachings, and ethical example of Sir William Osler, or the John McGovern Center for Oslerian Medicine at the University of Texas, and countless other programs at medical schools and medical societies around the world. I just learned this morning, perhaps some of you knew already, that the Office of Medical Education at the UC Davis School of Medicine is called the Office of Student Learning and Educational Resources, or OSLER. And many people, including probably some in this room, have made the case that Osler simply was the best physician of all time, period. Now, for me as a historian of medicine, it's less important whether that case can or cannot be proven. The fact that people are making it gives a sense of the work that the myth of Osler has performed as an animating spirit for generation upon generation of physicians, well outside of the sphere of Johns Hopkins, to become better, to have an ideal to aspire to. Because I want to linger on this, we need to believe when we're patients facing baffling and often terrifying forms of illness and incapacity that the person in charge of our care might be both abreast of the latest knowledge relevant to our case, but also have the ability to sit and listen with us. We need to believe when we don our new white coats and step into wards as students, interns, residents, that the people just a few rungs ahead of us in a sequence of clinical training knows more than we do, and can show us a way forward amidst our own uncertainty. We know that life on the wards rarely plays out as cleanly as it does in the textbooks, and that clinical experience is a maze in which we can lose ourselves and our guiding values, and we need our everyday Virgils to show us a path forward. So myths, in other words, are living things, they're necessary things, and they change over time. We adjust the stories we tell of ourselves, about ourselves, over time to incorporate new values. The creation myth of the four doctors and the cult of Osler capture key values of our institution, but they also miss others that have developed since 1907. It will not escape the attention of anyone in this room that we're gazing upon four white men in a medical school built initially upon a segregated hospital in a deeply segregated city of Baltimore in the year 1907. And so there are many values that Johns Hopkins has come to embody since then, especially over the past century, even in the past decade, that simply were not yet present in this portrait at that time. Nor do we endorse every single thing Osler did as the act of a medical deity, right? Osler, many of you will know, was an inveterate prankster. The Index of Cushing's Life of Sir William Osler contains 36 different references under the title of practical jokes, pranks, etc. And certainly not all of his pranks, when we look through them, are things we would laugh at today or perhaps consider at good taste. But if Osler the myth can do no wrong, Osler the man was keenly aware of his limitations. And this is the last thing I'd like to linger on, is one of the greatest strengths of the historical as opposed to the mythical Osler. on the eve of his move to Johns Hopkins in 1889, before he had written the Principles and Practice of Medicine, before he had founded the modern medical residency here at Hopkins, before he became knighted as a Regius Professor of Medicine at Oxford, Osler delivered a parting address to his former students at his former faculty at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine that defined a cornerstone in his philosophy of clinical medicine. And this is Equimenitas, the title of Osler's most famous essay for clinicians in training. It doesn't focus on any particular disease or scientific development. It doesn't even focus on one of his many pithy quotes for which Osler has become justly famous, but on an abstract value, a human value essential to good doctoring. And this is simply to learn how to act in a time of crisis with humility of the knowledge of one's own limitations, but to be able to act all the same such that one can inspire hope in others, to act amidst uncertainty and not be paralyzed. So crucial to the message of equanimitas on all of the Osler ties, loosely translated as imperturbability and equanimity, is the starting assumption that the physician is fallible, facing terrible times with incomplete knowledge, trusted to do the right thing even if it isn't always clear what that is. It's a very human and a very humble aspiration to be able to act with knowledge of one's own imperfections. So looking at Dr. Auwaerter, listening to those who've spoken at the podium before me already today, gazing out at all of you, this human value that we celebrate when we celebrate Osler is very much alive and well and still forms a guiding tenet of all we do. Recognizing the virtues we associate with both the mythical and historical Osler as present in the living example of Dr. Paul Auwaerter, we can also do something else today, which is to contribute to some new myth-making. To the extent that Paul now embodies these values we associate with Osler, he also adds to that mythology his own unique virtues, adapts them to the current day, and carries it forward to future generations in new form. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Gupta and Dr. Thomas, to introduce Dr. Paul Auwaerter as the recipient of the 2025 Osler Award for Clinical Excellence. Thank you all, and congratulations.
Hi, I'm Dave Thomas, and I am delighted to represent a long-standing personal perspective as leader of the cult of Paul Auwaerter. So, no one exemplifies the virtues of Osler more than Paul. And it's not just one, it's the extent to which in each of these these virtues that we associate with Osler that Paul has excelled. Obviously, he's an outstanding clinician. He was just a couple years into his career when he already became the one that we went to, not just because we had a difficult case that we couldn't solve ourselves, but for our own problems and our family members' problems. And there's probably no greater praise than when we bring our own problems and our family to a clinician for help. And it's not just clinical excellence, but also clinical program building. Like Osler, Paul's built amazing programs. He created the first outpatient infectious disease program, the Rockland practice, and has sustained that to this day. He also transformed the clinical inpatient practice of infectious diseases, and in doing so, he created a clinical excellence pathway for our faculty that has since been mirrored with the School of Medicine's clinical excellence pathway, and has also been adopted and copied at other academic centers. Paul's an outstanding educator like Osler. He not only teaches us how to take care of our patients and our difficult cases, but also is head of the POC-IT Guide, an app that provides point-of-care information of how to best care for patients. And he's established national guidelines for Lyme and other conditions. So outstanding clinician, outstanding clinical program development, outstanding educator, and also an outstanding clinical researcher. He has papers in the JAMA and the New England Journal, has really reached the highest zenith of clinical education and clinical research. And finally, like Osler, he's a leader of academic medicine and is rose to the highest rank as president of the Infectious Disease Society of America in 2018 and represented us at Hopkins and also the United States infectious disease community in that way. And so in each of these, as I look out in the audience, there's many of us that have maybe have achieved a high standard in one or two of these virtues, but to be so outstanding in so many is truly, truly unique. And I think that's what uniquely qualifies Paul to be the first recipient of the Sir William Osler Clinical Excellence Award, and why I'm delighted to count him as a friend. Paul, congratulations.
Well, President Daniels, Vice Dean Maria Olivia Humker, Landon King, Professor Green, friends and colleagues, it's truly an honor to be here and a privilege to honor our very own Paul Auwaerter. I think you've already heard that he's the inaugural recipient of the Osler Award of Clinical Excellence, and I think we can all safely say that he's a giant among giants, and that's no easy feat at a place like Johns Hopkins. And it's not just in the field of infectious diseases, it's also in internal medicine. In fact, today we were at Grand Rounds, and he leads that every week. We listen with awe and with his humor and his grace. He rattled off the differentials for not just the infectious causes of what ulcers are in the mouth, but he went on to talk about the autoimmune, and he went on to tell us about all the possibilities of what could be these ulcers. And so there we have it. It happens every week. It's a magical thing. I also want to thank Dr. Charles Homcy for your generosity, for really making this possible award. It's really wonderful to have the historical reference and the inspiration that you spent a lot of time here. It's really thanks to visionary philanthropists like yourself that, we know that Elizabeth Garrett and you and many others sort of make this place magical to honor people such as Paul Auwaerter. Next, I want to thank Karen. And by the way, Karen, I learned recently, is a, well, let's just put it this way. She plays a fierce pickleball game. There's more stories there, but I'll tell you later. Osler said, the practice of medicine is an art, not a trade, a calling, not a business, a calling in which your heart will be exercised equally with your head. Paul is a perfect example of this. You've all heard how incredible Paul is as a master diagnostician, the physician to whom we turn to when we are stumped with a difficult case, and how best to manage our patient when we're not sure. He's really the greatest clinician amongst us, and each week we, as I said, learn a tremendous amount. He's a world expert in tick-borne diseases and all things related to arboviruses and the like, and also a very much sought advisor. But importantly, his patients consistently say, and I had the chance to go through pages of remarks between 2021 and 2025, uniformly over 110 remarks, best doctor ever, great listener, able to crack my case. I'm so grateful to him for having really helped me over the years. And I think that that's really, and in fact, the smartest person ever. I mean, this is just page after page, you sort of go through these. He's also been a sought-after NIH study section advisor, serves on the board of the American Lyme Foundation, serves on biotech foundations. So you can just see already the sort of expanse of the knowledge that he brings to these many different areas. And of course, I use the POC-IT tool, and thank you, because it's my peripheral brain, and I think for many of us, it's our peripheral brain. You wrote 146 modules of it based on what we last counted. It could be more. And what you probably don't know, and I want to sort of talk about this as being incredibly important in this period of time, is how much he does behind the scenes to mentor the next generation of clinicians and clinical researchers. Now more than ever, our field of infectious diseases needs inspiration, needs support. We only half fill our programs now. We thankfully are filling, but we cannot take it for granted. And so Paul every year provides the funds from the POC-IT Guide to help with our faculty development guide. He does a loan repayment program for the Infectious Diseases Fellows that a grateful individual gave in her honor. He's helped to recruit fellows and the faculty using his philanthropic funds that he garners from his very grateful patients. And he quietly does this. In fact, when I took this job a few years ago, I didn't even know all the contributions that Paul was doing because he does it quietly and without fanfare. And that's really, truly a remarkable thing, to sort of be really caring about everyone else, caring about the patients, caring about the trainees, and caring about us in the faculty in the Infectious Diseases Division. So I really want to thank you, Paul, for really making a mark and doing it in such a spectacular way. The other thing that he's been known for is to really help provide seed grants. So he founded the Fisher Center, and thanks to the Fisher family that helped to create this. But again, it wasn't about his own research. He instead decided to take that foundational donation to the center and create seed grants. And every year, and to this day, he's awarded 58 faculty the Fisher seed grants, and has had a 24-fold return on investment to the university from those seed grants. That, I think, blows out any kind of investor philosophy. So thank you, Paul. We've got to get on that and really expand that further. And then lastly, I will say every year we have a gathering at the Infectious Diseases meeting, and that's for celebrating our alumni, faculty, staff, and trainees. And every year, Paul takes on the charge to organize that at ID Week, and it's a wonderful celebration of our incredible alumni, faculty, and staff and trainees that come together, and that he supports the gathering, and we make it a lot of fun for all of us. So I just want to end on a song that I wrote, and for those of you who know me, I'm neither musical nor am I a good composer. So bear with me. It's called Bug Busters. If there's something strange in your abdomen, who you gonna call? Paul Auwaerter. If something's weird and it won't get better, who you gonna call? Paul Auwaerter. He ain't afraid of no bacteria. He ain't afraid of no virus. If you're seeing things running through your head, who you gonna call? Paul Auwaerter. An invisible bug sleeping in your bed, who you gonna call? Paul Auwaerter. He ain't afraid of no fungi. He ain't afraid of no pus. Who you gonna call? Paul Auwaerter. If you're stumped on the phone, call Paul Auwaerter. So with that, I'd like to now welcome Dr. Olivia Hamker to present the Osler Award.
I am not going to be rapping. It's a hard act to follow. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria Oliva Hemker, and thank you to Drs. Gupta and Thomas for really highlighting the impact of Paul's work. So, Paul, you've heard many words today, and I think we've all seen how you embody the legacy of William Osler. You have your expertise, your clinical leadership, your program development, your educational skills, your mentorship, really all reflect, the highest ideals of our profession, and you truly represent what's the best of Hopkins. So I'm going to ask Charles, Dr. Homcy, to please come up here and join me. Thank you for giving us some fun to the faculty. And Paul, you want to come up? Charles, why don't you show me on the other side? Paul, yep. And so it's really a pleasure, it's my distinct pleasure, on behalf of the School of Medicine and in my role as Vice Dean for Faculty, to present you, Paul, with the Osler Award for Clinical Excellence. This is the inaugural 4 Doctors Award. Congratulations, Paul.
Wow. Talk about getting a swollen head. I have a good reason, I think. President Daniels, Vice Deans Olivia Hemker, King, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests and friends, those here and joining online, thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot to me. I mean, Hopkins has been my home since 1988, and I can't tell you how much this award means. It's really with profound gratitude and humility that I received this Osler Award for Clinical Excellence. And I want to thank my nominators, also the selection committee, and Dr. Charles Homcy for the extraordinary generosity in establishing these awards, which really reflect the mission that I heard about when I first came to the School of Medicine. Although this is a designated singular honor, the award demonstrates something far greater than my efforts. Really, I think it really is a testament to the remarkable environment we all share here at Johns Hopkins, where excellence is practiced daily by our clinicians. It's not merely a goal, but a collective pursuit. Thank you to my many colleagues, many of whom are here today, that I count on to draw upon your expertise for our patients over the many years. So, what is the recipe for clinical excellence? They're always the centurions. How did you live to be 100? I'm sure there are many elements. I'm not sure I know what they will all are, or I'll do them justice at all. What I do know, though, is the origin probably shouldn't rest with my 7th grade science teacher, who made an offhand comment that sparked the first thought that I could be a doctor. What did he say? He pointed out that I could balance chemical equations. 2 hydrogens and an oxygen makes 2 water molecules. Well, it's been over 40 years since I've done any chemical balancing, so I don't think that's really the hallmark of clinical excellence. But for me, the real engine are the role models, and Charles mentioned that, the role models that are here in abundance who foster enthusiasm, curiosity, empathy, and a drive to help patients while educating others, but also asking questions. The founding doctors, which we heard a lot today, and all the excellent remarks, laid the foundation to continue to this day that really amplify innovation, which I think is a hallmark of Johns Hopkins, with collaboration and a commitment to our patients with providing trusted guidance, whether it's in primary care or seeking specialty care. It's the spirit that I found when I arrived here in 1988 as to join the Osler House staff in internal medicine that made the deepest impression on me and came from exemplar clinicians, such as Thomas Trail, who actually convinced me to come to Johns Hopkins, imparting then, when I joined here, cardiology wisdom and lessons during his tea time. Those of you that know Tom Trail, I'm not talking about golf, but the beverage. And other master clinicians that during my residency really shaped, I think, my sense of how to be an excellent physician. David Hellman, leading the house staff, while he and Mary Betty Stevens helped us learn to make difficult diagnoses, as well as learn some of the arcane world of autoimmune diseases. There are, of course, so many others, and I think we can all take a moment and acknowledge those that have helped you, us, dedicating their time and talents to be the best clinician we can be. In these challenging times, I take comfort in knowing that the spirit of inquiry and exploration and new ideas, as well as problem solving, remains vigorous and alive at Johns Hopkins, and will not only help individual patients, but also magnifies our efforts through discovery, leading to advances in care. These efforts depend entirely on the unsung heroes who provide outstanding daily support in hospitals, clinics, research programs, and administration, creating an atmosphere where we can thrive. And I really think that is such an important part that has not been spoken about today, is the many people here that contribute to the mission. And I especially want to, this is my opportunity to thank a lot of people. Had the pleasure of working with the best out and clinic manager I've had in 37 years, Dietra Roulette, up at Green Spring Station, who really runs an amazing clinic. The heart of our work, though, lies in the relationships we build with our patients. And I have found spending time ensures patients can, that spending time ensures that patients can express their expectations, their struggles, their fears, which are key to building trust. I mean, we talk about that a bit and about many aspects of society and people losing trust, and I think that's something I took for granted early in my medical career, but now is really what I try to do at the outset. And it requires work and provides a basis then that people can actually get the best medical care and perhaps follow your recommendations. For me, the practice of medicine extends far beyond the clinical outcomes. It lies in the moments of connection, shared stories, and gratitude expressed by those we care for. It is definitely a privilege, and I thank my patients and our patients for entrusting their health to us in Johns Hopkins. In this vein, although voiced over 100 years ago, I thought I'd mention some of the favorite Osler quotes. I mean, this is the Osler Award. We heard one or two so far, but many of you are probably familiar with these, but I think they do speak to the power of Johns Hopkins medicine. The first, the good physician treats the disease, the great physician treats the patient with the disease. Second, medicine is best learned by the bedside and not in the classroom. Third, medicine is the science of uncertainty and the art of probability. And lastly, one finger in the throat and one in the rectum makes a good diagnostician. I think a lot of my trainees never liked that one very much. If Yuka Minabe is here, she knows what I'm talking about. Every day we have the opportunity to make a meaningful impact in the lives of others, and this is a gift that motivates us to do our best as healers of body and soul. And I am very lucky to be here, lucky in so many ways to have had the good fortune that so many star talents within the Johns Hopkins firmament took an interest in me, for which I be forever indebted. And I cannot name them all, but I just need to name a few, and I think it just speaks to the really amazing talents over the past decades that have just walked these halls and worked in these labs. Diane Griffin provided scientific grounding in virology and immunology, along with teaching critical scientific reasoning. During my early days on faculty, I received career advice and support from Michael Clagg and David Levine. Even though he was retired, Dean Richard Ross provided critical insights and helped me navigate the Hopkins environment and provided really advice for many years on how to build a good career. John Bartlett, our former ID division chair, provided visionary ideas, including recognizing the genius that when you had that Palm Pilot, remember the Palm Pilot, that had means of conveying clinical decision information in the form of this little electronic device that you could cram a lot of information instead of having big books in your white pocket going around the hospital. It was really an innovation and allowed me as a young faculty member to become involved with that project and eventually lead that effort. But it was then a hidden benefactor, someone that I don't think anyone here really knows the story, but it was Richard Grossi that really provided the support when the project hit rough waters, but now is a profitable enterprise and gave sound business advice. David Thomas, a great friend and the previous director of the division, believed in me and supported the expansion of clinical programs. He first gave me solid advice as a fellow, which kept me here and hasn't stopped, not only for me, but I think for so many in our division. Dave is really one of the treasures of our faculty. Thank you. I want to thank Dean Ed Miller for his interest and his many years of support within our division, and also from the Fisher family, Sherrilyn and Ken Fisher, who have supported education and research in our division and have been the extraordinary catalyst for so many investigators. I'm also so glad that I see Yvonne Higgins and Diane Lanham here, who have provided the critical managerial foundation to keep me in check and keep me on task and not be too forgetful about things that has enabled the Fisher Center to be a success. Lastly, Amita Gupta is now leading our ID division in these most turbulent of times, and I thank you for your leadership, for keeping this spirit alive, which I believe is what makes our ID division the best, working as an extraordinary family of clinicians, researchers, and educators. Lastly, I am most fortunate to have the love and support of my family. Medicine is a selfish profession with great demands on time and attention. I'm deeply grateful to my wife, Karen, for her love, patience, encouragement, advice, and unwavering belief in me. I'm so lucky to have you in my life and by my side. In closing, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude for the award and this incredible honor that I hope to continue to live up to the highest expectation it represents. I share this award with remarkable colleagues, our dedicated staff, and most importantly, our patients who inspire us every day. Thank you.
Well, I started with, it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood and in here, and I'm sticking with it. This has been pretty remarkable. Paul, thank you, and congratulations again. As has been alluded to, I personally have benefited from your medical care. I showed up at his house about 7:30 at night with pus coming out of my scalp from an incision, and he took care of me. But even more so, back when I had a, back when I had a,
Are we sure about that?
I'm sorry, this is still better than your two-finger story, so. I have other words here. Yeah, no, you gotta come back. But even more so, when I had a real job, seeing patients in the ICU, I've benefited professionally from your frequent wisdom and counsel as we've been trying to manage difficult things, and that's really meant a ton to me. Your dedication to clinical excellence and compassionate service is remarkable, and I'm really confident that I speak for everybody in the room that thinking across generations of our colleagues, we would be really hard-pressed to identify someone more fitting than you for this inaugural award. It's truly remarkable. Dr. Homcy, as Maria indicated, you brought us fun. So thank you for that, but you also brought us inspiration and an opportunity to carry this on going forward in ways that will help us and our successors remember why we're here, how we came to be here, and what it is that we do. And Ron, thank you for enabling it to happen now, as opposed to some other time down the future. So with that, thanks to all of you for joining us today. I hope that you will stay for the reception, and please join me one more time in congratulating Paul on his award.